What does a lieutenant do when the map no longer matches the ground beneath his boots? For roughly 36 hours in June 1944, Jack B. Hinson faced that question without a company, without clear orders, and without the certainty that friendly lines lay in any predictable direction. He was behind German positions near Sainte-Mère-Église, and he knew it. The air carried the smell of damp hedgerows and churned earth, and distant artillery rolled across the low fields beyond Sainte-Mère-Église. The separation traces back to the chaos that followed the Utah beach landings. Elements of the 4th Infantry Division came ashore on June 6, 1944, in scattered formations due to tides and navigation drift. Units reorganized under fire and confusion. In that process, Hinson became detached from his immediate command structure, a documented fact in divisional reporting. By June 9th, fighting inland had intensified. Sainte-Mère-Église, secured by the 82nd Airborne Division in the early hours of D-Day, remained a focal point for German counteraction. The surrounding hedgerows and flooded lowlands fragmented visibility and movement. For an officer separated from his battalion, terrain alone could turn short distances into strategic barriers. After-action materials from the 4th Infantry Division note Hinson operating independently in this sector between 9 and 10 June. They do not romanticize the episode. There are no embellished duels or cinematic escapes. Instead, the language is administrative. He assisted in organizing displaced airborne personnel and reported enemy activity during a critical consolidation phase. The 4th Infantry Division, G3, journal entry for 10 June, 1944, Record Group 407, National Archives, records Hinson as operating independently in vicinity of Sainte-Mère-Église, assisting airborne personnel and reporting enemy movement. That consolidation phase mattered. While Utah Beach is often described as the easier landing compared to Omaha, the inland situation remained unstable for days. German units from the 91st Air Landing Division and elements of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment contested approaches. Counterattacks near Neuville-au-Plain and along causeways threatened communication between beachhead and airborne zones. Hinson's isolation unfolded within that instability. He encountered paratroopers separated from their companies, men who had dropped wide of intended zones in the early hours of June 6th. Missed drops are well documented in 82nd and 101st Airborne reports. By June 9th, some small groups still lacked firm attachment to larger formations. His role, as recorded, was not to launch assaults, but to impose order. Officers trained in infantry doctrine understood rally points, fields of fire, and the chain of reporting. Even a handful of armed men, properly oriented, could screen a road or relay sightings. In a landscape divided by hedgerows, information equaled protection. The physical environment compounded pressure. Normandy's bocage forced movement along narrow lanes bordered by earthen embankments, topped with dense vegetation. Visibility often shrank to a few dozen yards. The constant presence of distant artillery, an unavoidable feature of the sector, during these days signaled that the front remained fluid rather than fixed. One lesser-known detail in divisional documentation is that scattered officers frequently acted as temporary coordinators between airborne and infantry elements until formal boundaries were clarified. Hinson's activity fits that pattern. Rather than waiting passively to be rediscovered, he used his rank to shape coherence among men equally uncertain of their position. This challenges a popular assumption that by 9 June, the Utah sector was fully secure and neatly organized. In reality, logistical buildup continued under intermittent fire. Engineers cleared obstacles. Supply columns pushed inland. Commanders worked to stitch together units that had landed or dropped apart from original plans. Order was still being constructed. Primary documentation does not record Hinson's inner thoughts. What it does confirm is sustained activity over a defined 36-hour window before he rejoined American lines. Sustained movement in contested territory implies limited rest, continuous alertness, and the physical strain common to infantry operations in early Normandy's humid, enclosed fields. During this window, he relayed enemy movements. Specific sightings passed along through whatever communication channels were available. In fragmented terrain, that likely meant physical movement between positions, a method frequently described in airborne and infantry reports when radios failed or batteries weakened. Information had to travel by foot. So the mystery is not whether he performed a singular heroic act. It is how a detached lieutenant prevented confusion from multiplying. 36 hours behind German lines did not alter the grand strategy of Operation Overlord. But within a narrow strip of hedgerow and roadway, his decisions influenced who stood organized and who did not. The 36-hour span ends not with spectacle, but with reintegration. Before that moment, however, Hinson operated in a zone where front lines overlapped and certainty was scarce. The question shifted from survival to utility. How could a single officer increase clarity inside a battlefield, defined by fragmentation and incomplete reports? The answer lay in communication. After-action reports emphasized that he relayed enemy movements during 9 to 10 June near Sainte-Mère-Église. At that stage of the campaign, German counterthrusts probed for weak seams between airborne and seaborne forces. Even minor sightings, troop columns, vehicle noise, shifting positions, could affect how local commanders deployed limited reserves. This was not glamorous work. It meant observation, confirmation, and repetition. In Normandy's bocage, a hedgerow could conceal machine gun teams until engagement began at close range. Infantry doctrine stressed verification before transmission. A mistaken report might pull men from a threatened road. Accurate reporting, by contrast, stabilized sectors without firing a shot. There is no verified record of dramatic firefights attached to Hinson's name in this episode. That absence is instructive. The 4th Infantry Division's documentation frames his contribution in functional terms: organization and reporting. In a campaign remembered for airborne daring and amphibious assault, administrative steadiness rarely attracts narrative attention, yet it underpinned consolidation. Humanizing details surface indirectly through parallel accounts from airborne units in the same area. Paratroopers described exhaustion from days of disrupted sleep and limited hot rations. Some wrote about scavenging field kitchens or sharing captured German bread. Any officer coordinating such men had to account for fatigue and hunger alongside tactical positioning. Time pressure added another layer. By June 10th, American planners were already concerned with expanding the beachhead toward the Meurthe River crossings. Securing approaches meant ensuring no isolated German pockets threatened lateral movement. Information relayed from small, improvised groups, like the one Hinson helped orient, fed into that broader operational picture. A lesser-discussed fact about early Normandy is how frequently officers temporarily commanded composite groups. Rank provided continuity when unit identity blurred. Hinson's authority as a second lieutenant may seem modest, yet in dispersed terrain it allowed decisive direction. Orders delivered clearly in uncertainty often prevented friendly fire incidents or redundant patrols. Strategically, the revelation is operational rather than dramatic. Consolidation at Utah depended not on spectacle, but on dozens of officers converting fragmentation into usable intelligence. Hinson's 36-hour interval represents that hidden mechanism of stabilization. Victory at Utah Beach did not hinge on a single dramatic stand. It depended on converting chaos into coherence. The beach landing's relative success, fewer casualties than Omaha, created an impression of ease. Inland documentation shows instead a patient process of alignment and correction over successive days. When Hinson rejoined established American forces after that 36-hour interval, he carried more than personal survival. He brought confirmed knowledge of enemy positioning and the experience of coordinating men outside formal structure. Such reintegration reduced duplication of effort and sharpened subsequent deployments in the Sainte-Mère-Église corridor. No primary source suggests he sought recognition. The episode appears in reports rather than memoir-driven legend. That distinction matters. Many wartime stories grow through retelling. This one remains concise, almost understated. Its credibility rests on paperwork, unit logs, operational summaries, compiled during or shortly after the events themselves. The emotional arc, therefore, is restrained. It moves from dislocation to measured function. Fear and uncertainty are implied by circumstance, not dramatized through invented dialogue. The pressure came from responsibility, separated from command yet still accountable to mission and men. Competence in this case meant resisting panic and choosing structure. For modern viewers, the relevance extends beyond battlefield geography. Complex systems, military or civilian, still fracture under stress. The instinct to wait for perfect instruction can magnify disorder. Hinson's documented conduct suggests another approach. Apply training locally, communicate accurately, and rebuild coherence from fragments rather than headlines. The mystery posed at the beginning resolves quietly. What does a lieutenant do when cut off behind enemy lines? According to the record from June 9th to 10th, 1944, he organizes, observes, reports, and returns. Not myth, not cinematic flourish, just disciplined action inside a narrow window that helped steady a widening front.